Okay, so I am Cheese Enthusiast or Curat, and I've been working on Lithos, the future of proof of work mining. So let's talk about the goal of Lithos. And so the Lithos team has a vision of bringing transparency and decentralization to proof of work mining. And specifically, this is related to mining pools. Now, mining pools have existed for a while. They are just a way for miners to essentially come together, take all of their hash rate, and produce blocks in a way that allows them to get consistent payments. Mining pools are currently quite centralized, but there have been attempts to decentralize pools in the past. One attempt that I worked on previously was SmartPools on Ergo. If you remember getblock.io, we worked on a way to essentially uh, make the payments of mining pools completely transparent. Now, SmartPools was a novel technology at the time, but we found that there were still many centralized aspects to mining that could not really be solved using the sort of setup that SmartPools had. For example, the pool operator inside the smart pool system had full control of the back end. They could change whatever they wanted in terms of what a miner worked on, like their shares, or how much they got paid. They also had complete control over the block production. For example, the transactions that go into the block, any storage rent that was claimed from the block, etc. So the goal of Lithos is really to try and decentralize all aspects of the mining pool and make sure that miners can mine to pools in a way that still allows them to get their consistent payments, but at the same time, do it in a decentralized manner. So let's talk about centralization in proof of work mining. So mining pools in general, obviously they have some benefits in terms of allowing more miners to enter the mining space with less hash rate and then therefore get more consistent payouts. But uh, proof of work mining pools haven't really been perfectly decentralized and they have a lot of issues associated with them. So it started as a decentralized process where individual miners competed to solve these complex mathematical problems. It's turned into a centralized system where the largest mining pools have significant control over the network and can potentially manipulate it for their own benefit. For example, while it may not necessarily be likely, mining pools could perform 51% attacks on the blockchain. They could also act in bad ways to get rewards from miners that they're deserved, or they could even change what transactions go into the blocks that is being mined. And that way they can censor certain transactions. You may have heard about this happening on Ethereum, for example, where certain mining pools ended up censoring transactions to Tornado Cash, which was seen as sort of a bad thing because it's about mixing the cryptocurrency and preventing people from figuring out where the cryptocurrency came from. So in general, mining pools have a lot of power, and they're able to do all these things like censorship, potentially steal rewards, etc. So the concentration of power in the hands of a few large mining pools is a serious problem. And it kind of goes against the vision that Satoshi Nakamoto had when he originally came up with the idea of proof of work and its application in blockchains. So proof of work today is still very important. It's still widely used as a consensus algorithm in the cryptocurrency industry. But with the introduction of mining pools, it has fundamentally changed. It is much more about the mining pools and the power that they have rather than the individual miner and what they're able to provide. And this is introduce significant risks to the security, decentralization of various networks. I'd say the main issue is really that mining pools have complete control of payments and block production. So payments obviously is about how miners get paid for the work that they produced while they were mining a block. Mining pools have complete control over this, and that they can essentially go into their database, see whatever shares that a miner produced, and they can change it on the fly to whatever they want. So if, let's say, a mining pool has some sort of personal vendetta against a miner, they could theoretically give that person less rewards. Additionally, mining pools have complete control over block production. And block production is really important, in my opinion, because it is essentially the way for miners to insert their own transactions or allow whatever transactions they want while they're mining to the chain. Mining pools have complete control over what goes into the block and what kind of transactions are allowed. As I referenced earlier, there was a whole tornado cash scandal on Ethereum where certain blocks were censored when they contain transactions from this tornado cash app. And this kind of really goes against the whole, idea of decentralization in the first place. We want people to be able to essentially submit whatever transactions they want, have them picked up, and then put on the blockchain. Censorship from mining pools goes against this completely. So the goal of Lithos is really to handle these two problems. Make sure payments are completely decentralized and make sure block production is in the hands of the miners themselves. So what are we solving? So the first problem are mining pools are black boxes that are lacking transparency. They hurt decentralization in this way, and they have some history of being bad actors within proof of work cryptocurrencies. So to fully solve this problem, we have to fully decentralize mining pools and place them onto the blockchain using smart contracts. So by doing this, we ensure transparency, we ensure fair payouts, and we really empower the miners to do more versus the pool operators who may not necessarily have the best interests of the blockchain in mind. We also ensure like a more efficient flow of capital from the coin emission directly to miners without presence of middlemen who can manipulate the fees without any rules. Now, our second problem is that mining pools require trustless and fair distribution. In normal mining pools, rewards are distributed to miners by keeping track of partial block solutions, also known as shares. Mining pools keep track of millions of shares. They have databases usually that essentially keep track of each miner's shares and how many shares they submitted during the mining process. When a block is found, mining pools look through the database and decide how much work the miner produced for the mining pool in order to determine how much they got paid. Now, we want to decentralize mining pools, but on the blockchain, we do not have the storage capacity to store millions of shares. It's just not viable. It would cost too much. So in order to solve that, Lithos came up with this idea of the non-interactive share proof. So non-interactive share proofs are essentially a way to compress the amount of work that a miner produced into a small handful of shares. And then that handful of shares can be verified on the blockchain using various smart contracts to determine how much work a miner produced over a certain period of time. Non-interactive share proofs, or NISPs, are used throughout Lithos, and they're used to ensure that miners are paid fairly according to the amount of work that they produced while a block solution was being found. NISPs are Computationally, very simple to evaluate and determine whether or not a miner is lying about how much work they produced. Additionally, storage-wise, they do not require a lot of space on the blockchain. And in a place where space is very limited, NISPs are able to compress the amount of data and make sure that costs associated with the mining pool itself are not too high. NISPs themselves are essentially a collection of around 10 shares with high difficulty that are used to determine how much work a miner produced. They do this through concepts borrowed from NEPA actually, specifically the concept of goodness and the idea that when a person is mining over a large period of time, it is almost certain that they will produce a number of large, high difficulty shares throughout that mining process. NISPs use this idea to essentially prove that a miner performed work by checking whether or not they produced those high difficulty shares. Now, in order to store NISPs on the blockchain, they are very small, but still, we want to be, when we're dealing with smart contracts, we want to be as efficient as possible, space and computation-wise. So the current idea of Lithos is to use an optimistic rollup to evaluate each NISP and ensure that while computation isn't too high, we can still ensure that people are being provably fair and are being paid according to the actual amount of work that they're producing. Sorry. So decentralizing mining pools requires ensuring that there is some amount of censorship resistance. Now, on Ergo specifically, the Coinbase transaction has been made so that it must go to the public key address of whichever miner mined the block. So in order for censorship resistance to really be possible on the Ergo blockchain, we need to do what's called collateralizing the erg. And what I really mean by that is to provide an amount of erg equal to the block reward before the block is mined. Now, when the block is mined, that erg amount given by the lender is distributed to the miners as the block reward, while the actual block reward, which goes to a certain public key address, is given to the lender's address instead. So in this way, you essentially allow for miners to create their own block, set the public key reward address of the block to the lender, and then allow the actual payment to instantly go out to all the miners whenever the block is verified. So this is important for a few reasons. For one, it does allow censorship resistance in the sense that any miner can mine their own block while still ensuring that the reward of the block goes to all other miners in the pool. It's also very useful in the sense that when you're normally mining on Ergo, there is a certain 720 block wait that you must do before the block is confirmed. And during that wait, nobody is able to be paid. Collateralization essentially kind of cuts through this process. It allows miners to be paid almost instantaneously whenever the block is found. So we want to ensure that we have these collateralized mining pools because we want to ensure censorship resistance. We want to avoid these problems like I called back to before, like with the tornado cash issue. We don't want mining pools to censor certain transactions. That is really one of the core goals of Lithos, to ensure that miners have complete control over the blocks. And giving control to miners over block production, that also allows miners to gain more erg. They're able to add storage rent transactions specifically for Ergo. and they're able to produce ERG through MEV. And MEV was a big part of the reason why Ethereum, while it was proof of work, was able to gain so many miners. MEV allows miners to gain additional rewards through smart contract interactions, indexes, stablecoin contracts, etc. And we want to be able to bring that to Ergo, but give that power of choosing what actually goes into the MEV to the actual miners themselves versus the mining pools. So one important aspect of collateralization is that we don't want to prevent miners from immediately joining our decentralized pool without having ERG. Now, if we force miners to collateralize themselves, that means, let's say a new miner comes into the Ergo ecosystem, they have 0 ERG in their wallet, and they want to join a Lithos pool. If they have no ERG in their pocket and collateralization requires at least an ERG amount equal to the block reward, then this kind of clashes with the idea of any anonymous new miner being able to come into the system and provide work to the Ergo blockchain and then secure it. So Lithos specifically has focused on third-party collateralization, and that means that people outside of miners themselves are able to provide ERG to the mining pool to collateralize the block, and that would allow new miners to join without having any ERG at all, and therefore mine on this decentralized pool without having to put up some amount of ERG that they may not already have, right? Collateralization also allows people outside of mining to gain ERG by using pool fees in a way that is contractually obligated to not be sort of suspicious. For example, like a normal centralized mining pool may be able to adjust their fees any way they want. Lithos mining pools, the fees will be determined by the smart contracts, determined by the market of collateralization itself, by all of these lenders who want to provide ERG to the blockchain to help secure it. This also goes into the Lithos token. Now, Lithos token, tokenomics are not particularly set yet, but the general idea is to incentivize miners to mine using Lithos and allow them to gain additional rewards despite the pool fee that they pay to the collateralizers. So let's go into some of the more technical aspects of Lithos now. Lithos protocol is an advanced decentralized mining pool protocol. There have been some mining pool protocols in the past that have been somewhat decentralized. A few examples that I can name is P2Pool on Monero has been running for a while. And that is essentially a sidechain on the Monero blockchain that allows miners to mine to the sidechain and then gain rewards of Monero. Now, it is decentralized. However, it faces a lot of problems in that block production is still not entirely on the miner's hands, as well as rewards are a little bit obfuscated. It doesn't help that Monero is a completely private blockchain, but essentially it's not the most ideal solution. Now, we've had smart pools on Ergo as well. These were a good idea, I think, but they didn't fully decentralize the entire process of mining. There was also another smart pool initiative on Ethereum while it was proof of work. It was also quite decentralized, however, it lacked efficiency. And that's something that is really important to us at Lithos. We want Lithos to be scalable. We want it to be able to potentially handle hundreds of thousands of miners at once. And past solutions to decentralized mining haven't been able to do that. So the first technical aspect, and I've talked about it just recently is collateralized mining pools. Um, and we want collateralization to essentially ensure that block production is in the hands of miners. We want miners to gain MEV rewards. We want miners to be able to have control over their storage rent. We want to avoid censorship of any transactions at all. And another technical aspect here is the non-interactive share proof, which is really, I think, this is the most important part of Lithos, and it completely changes how mining is done. Mining traditionally on a mining pool, you get your mining software, you connect to the stratum, and you produce hundreds of thousands of shares over a period of time. The mining pool takes these shares, they store in the database, and they determine how much work you did by looking at the amount of shares multiplied by the difficulty that you mined at. And obviously, this is not good enough for a smart contract. It just takes too much space and computation. So NISPs are the alternative, and they ask sort of a different question of the miner. Instead of asking how many shares did you produce over a period of time, we're asking, can you produce, say, 10 shares at a high enough difficulty to prove that you did a certain amount of work at while the block solution was being generated. And this kind of change of the question has a big implication in terms of how mining works on Lithos. You're not going to be mining in the traditional way. Obviously, you'll still have a mining software, you'll still have a stratum that you connect to, but the way your rewards are calculated are completely different. You are not simply adding up the number of shares and then dividing it based on the total number of shares produced by the pool. You are essentially proving that you did a certain amount of work by producing these high value shares. And then that allows you to store all of this data in a small space. NISPs also are very important because they are computationally efficient and they're efficient storage-wise. We can use optimistic rollups to allow for greater scalability with the smart contracts that we're using. Now, an optimistic rollup, you can think of it as a layer 2 solution that is essentially, it's taking all of these NISPs and it's assuming that each NISP is going to be completely successful and valid unless it is checked upon. Now, in Lithos, we plan to have lots of off-chain bots that will be checking each NISP submitted to the blockchain. And if a NISP is found to be fraudulent, a fraud-proof transaction is submitted, and that NISP is removed from the equation. Now, this is really important because we're not evaluating each share proof on its own. We're only evaluating share proofs when we know they're fraudulent. And what I mean by that is we're not evaluating share proofs on the blockchain. Obviously, evaluation is happening off-chain, but we're really focused on-chain evaluation because that is what is costly. And fraud proofs allow for us to minimize the amount of computation on-chain while allowing the majority of computation to happen off-chain, where computation is easy to do and there are way less limits regarding data and space. There will be incentive to submit fraud proofs. Now, usually with rollups, we have what are called sequencers, and sequencers can be kind of thought of as people who are submitting their rollups to the smart contracts, and then getting some kind of reward for that. In Lithos, we want everybody to potentially be a sequencer. And a sequencer is kind of equivalent to like a pool operator in that they're the ones getting the shares and submitting them. Now, obviously, we want individual miners to have the power in Lithos, so anybody can be a sequencer, potentially. But in general, there will be some limits because obviously, if we allow anybody to be a sequencer, then um, there's a classic problem with blockchains in that people can spam the blockchain. Um, so there will be some limits in regards to who can be a sequencer, but the general idea is that the limits will be low and that people will be able to become a sequencer with a certain amount of tokens and then submit these transactions to the smart contracts themselves. All right. So another important aspect of Lithos is that, oh yeah, no problem. Sorry, can you repeat that? Like, mhm. Oh no, absolutely not. Because the difference is that when I say a high difficulty share, the difficulty or the high difficulty is relative to a difficulty the miner themselves chooses. So if I have, say, like my shitty laptop right here, and I decide to mine on it, obviously I can't produce many high difficulty shares. I just don't have the computational power to do that. But on Lithos, you choose your own difficulty. You choose what difficulty you mine at, and um, that means that a high value share for you is different than a high value share for somebody with 20 GPUs in the back, for example, right? So when I say a high difficulty share, it's relative to your own computational power. And this is important, and I'll get more into it later about how your difficulty is chosen and the kind of effects that has on your payouts, how much you get paid, and how often you get paid. Now, for Lithos, the usage of non-interactive share proofs means that it is essentially completely blockchain agnostic. So non-interactive share proofs are really only evaluating the difficulty, which is sort of the value of the share or how high the actual number is compared to the target value that the blockchain wants you to find when you're looking for a block. Because we're only using math essentially to determine whether or not you did work, it's completely blockchain agnostic. And what that means is that you can use NISPs on something like Bitcoin, something like Litecoin, other proof of work currencies, Caspa, Ethereum, all of these currencies which are using traditional proof of work algorithms. You can use NISPs to evaluate how much work somebody did. And what that means is that we can have smart contracts on the Ergo blockchain, which allow you to mine in a decentralized manner while still mining to Bitcoin. So you can mine Bitcoin while mining on a decentralized pool. Same with Litecoin, same with Caspa. So so ideally the collateralization in that case would work using wrap tokens, for example, from Rosen. So in that case, you would have wrap tokens that are paid to the miner on the Ergo blockchain, while the actual block reward would have to go to somebody on the initial blockchain, for example, Bitcoin, and that lender would have to be somebody from that blockchain, essentially. So it would be a little bit more complicated, and it would require some support from, for example, a bridge like Rosen to completely successfully do, but it is completely possible. All right. Now, I mentioned the Lithos token earlier. Now, lenders who provide collateral uh, will be using the Lithos token to essentially provide that collateral, and that would allow miners to it would allow a sort of proof of work economy to occur because miners on Lithos will be mining, just for example, ERG, and they'll be also gaining these Lithos tokens at the same time. And those Lithos tokens would be used by lenders to essentially lock in their collateral for miners to use. And the idea behind this is to essentially stimulate a healthy economy between people who mine and people who don't. And it would allow people to essentially gain money without having any computational power, which is usually not possible on a proof of work blockchain. It's hard, like on a proof of work blockchain, you can't secure the blockchain and gain, you can't secure the blockchain without some computational power, usually. But the idea of Lithos is to have people who are not associated with the mining world necessarily to still help decentralize the blockchain itself. Yeah, exactly. It is similar to staking, but it's a little bit different in the sense that it's not really percentage based in the sense that having more tokens will necessarily get you more. Um, but it's still a way for people who are not involved in mining to gain some money uh, while still securing the blockchain. Um, I mean, I don't think it should be any issue between Rosen and two miners, or sorry, Rosen and Lithos. What do you mean by two miners though? Oh no, no, no. No, I don't think so. I mean, the way Lithos is working is just a normal stratum. So you can do anything that you do with your normal mining pools as long as it works with the stratum. So I know some people do dual mining, for example, where they partition part of their hash rate to, say, Bitcoin and some of it to Ergo. Um, you could do the same thing on Lithos without any real issue. Uh, we're using stratum to allow things to be compatible in a way that doesn't require miners to update too much. You don't have to upgrade anything. You don't have to change your general setup, uh, but you're still able to benefit from the general idea of Lithos itself and the decentralization. So let me explain it. So when somebody mines or somebody's producing a number of hashes over a period of time, um, we can mathematically prove that somebody producing a certain amount of hashes over a period of time will almost certainly produce a certain number of high difficulty shares while hashing. So what that means is that while they're producing all of these random hashes, there's all random numbers. So for, let's say that person produces these hashes over the course of an hour, they will mathematically produce a certain number of high number hashes that has to be that will be present inside their set of hashes that they produced. So Lithos is taking advantage of that fact that they mathematically will produce those number of hashes to prove that somebody actually produced or actually did a certain amount of work. So if I'm a miner and I want to get paid on Lithos, but I didn't actually do any work, right? I I just want to say that I mined for 12 hours straight and I produced all these hashes, um, but I actually haven't done the work myself. To prove that I did the work, I would have to have a certain number of high value hashes that I could show to a smart contract to show that I actually did the work. But if I'm lying, I wouldn't have those high value hashes in the first place. They wouldn't have existed. So that's the general idea of a NISP, is to use the fact that high value hashes will be produced over a certain amount of time and that they will be produced at a certain ratio relative to the number of hashes that I did throughout the period of time. If I'm lying, I won't have those high value hashes to present to the mining pool, and therefore it'll be quite easy for somebody to see that I'm being fraudulent. Yeah, exactly. And there are obviously other aspects that must be verified. For example, um, I don't want to accept high value hashes that were produced like a year ago, right? I need to make sure that the timestamp on these block headers is valid for the block that we're mining. I don't want to have a hash from 2 years ago if I'm mining a block from an hour ago, right? So there are other sort of qualifications that need to be met for a NISP to be valid. And these are all checked through these fraud proofs. Um, on the roll up for the Lithos protocol. Does that answer your question? Right, exactly. Exactly. That is all decentralized in smart contracts, yes. The logic itself, so the logic itself is being run off chain, right? We don't want to have that computation of checking each and every share inside the NISP. That would take a lot of time. We're doing the logic off chain, we're checking each NISP off chain, and if we find an issue, we're producing a fraud proof on the blockchain to ensure that that fraudulent NISP is taken off of it. And there's a certain value of incentive to do this, right? If I'm a miner, I don't want some other miner to take some portion of my money because they produced a fraudulent share, right? So if I'm a miner, I am therefore incentivized to make sure that each share on the on the Lithos protocol rather is valid and not fraudulent because I want my block reward to be maximized. Remember, block rewards are being separated between each miner inside the pool. So if I remove a miner who was fraudulent from the share of the reward, then I get more of a reward proportionally for myself. So there's a certain incentive to make sure that miners are always checking each and every NISP that is submitted to the Lithos protocol to make sure that they get paid maximally according to their work that they produced. Make sense? All right, cool. So let's talk about the testnet now. Um, after around 1.5 years of work and the release of Ergo 6.0, the Lithos testnet is nearing launch. The testnet serves as a way for miners to try out all the new aspects of Lithos, and it's also to help me find any bugs that were produced during this process. Already found a lot of bugs while I was developing it, so can't imagine how many bugs will be there, but really the goal is to try and iron out all of these issues before before anything gets released to the mainnet. So now tying back to what you and Benzel and were talking about, mining on Lithos is going to be a little bit different to traditional mining. Now, for one, Lithos or the Lithos client is providing a local stratum for you to mine towards. So what that means is that your stratum or the pool that you're connecting to is going to be locally produced. That means there's never a chance of stale shares. I don't know if you've mined before, but stale shares happens when the latency is too high and the difficulty that you're mining at is not equivalent to the difficulty that the pool wanted you to mine at. So when that happens, it just lost money, lost work for you, right? So having a local strata means that still shares are not going to happen. Additionally, miners on Lithos are solving a different problem. And this is going back to NISPs and how they work. So let's talk about difficulty now. So normal mining pools are asking the miners to send a certain amount of shares at a set difficulty. So if I go on, for example, here are miners today, I'll go on their 4G port and I'll be producing shares at the value 4G. So 4 times 10 to the 9, I think, is the value that I'm trying to produce shares at. I'm submitting any share above the value 4 times 10 to the 9, right? Now, this is not viable, as I've said, on a blockchain. So Lithos is instead using NISPs. And and NISPs are really asking a different question. Can I produce, now for Lithos right now, we're using a value of 10 shares. So the question that Lithos is asking is, can I produce 10 high value shares relative to the difficulty that I chose? And if I can produce those 10 shares, then I did produce a certain amount of work at that difficulty. So using this allows us to make things more efficient, make it more computationally efficient, more storage efficient. And it also changes how you mine. So as I said before, on hero miners, I'm mining at a set difficulty of 4G. Miners with different hash rate than me, they're probably mining at that same difficulty. I could have 100 mega hashes, or I could have, let's say, 10 gigahashes of hash rate, and I would still be mining on the 4G port. On Lithos, it's completely different. The difficulty that I'm mining at is relative to my own hash rate. So if I'm mining at, say, 100 mega hashes per second, I will be mining at a different difficulty compared to the person with a mining farm who's mining at 20 gigahashes per second. And what that means is that between the two of us, we need to produce different value shares to prove that we performed work at our difficulty. So let's say I'm mining at 1G, for example. Maybe I need to produce 10 shares at 5G to show that I performed work at 1G. Um, Now, if I have 20 gigahashes of hash rate power, I might be mining at, um, say 20T, I think is the next one. I'm not sure. Like, let's say I'm mining at 20T, then I need to produce 10 shares at like 50T. So the meaning of this is that the difficulty that you choose is directly tied to how much you get paid, because the difficulty is your way of showing that you're mining at a certain hash rate. So this has some effects on how you're getting paid. So for example, um, over So yeah, that is important. So the time scale for Lithos is relative to the usually some set period of time before the block was found. Because when the block is found, all shares are submitted and then they're evaluated. So we don't want miners to kind of lie and say, oh, I produced 10 shares like 2 weeks ago, and a block wasn't found until now, but my 10 shares are still valuable. They're not really as valuable generally. So we want to take shares that were produced within a certain period of time before the block was found. For example, let's say 12 hours before the block was found, you need to find 10 high value shares produced within that 12-hour period and then submit them when the block was found to show that you performed work while the block solution was being generated. And this essentially prevents people from lying about when or about what work they performed and when, right? We don't want people to have, fake shares that are coming from the future or shares that are no longer valuable from the past, right? We want the shares to be produced while the current block was being mined. Now, because you're able to choose your own difficulty on Lithos and you're able to determine what difficulty you want to mine at, there can be some, let's say, funky things that happen if you decide to stray away from whatever the Lithos client gives you. So the Lithos client will look at your hash rate and it'll give you sort of a set difficulty relative to your hash rate that you can mine at. Now, you're free to change that difficulty value to whatever you want. So let's say I want to be a little bit risky, right? Right? I want to maybe gain a little bit more money. So what I can do is I can set my difficulty value higher. And what that means is that my payments will not be as consistent. The reason for that is at my hash rate, I will not be able to reliably produce 10 high value shares for that difficulty. However, because my difficulty is related to how much I get paid, if I do produce 10 high value shares, I get paid more versus me mining at my normal difficulty. Exactly. You're trading your consistency of your payments for the potential reward of how much you get paid. So that can happen if you increase your difficulty. Now, lowering your difficulty, in general, it doesn't actually have much value because lowering your difficulty, you're just lowering your reward. And if you're already getting paid consistently enough, then it's not that useful. Now, if you're having trouble with payment consistency for some reason, then you can lower your difficulty and get paid consistently more often while sacrificing some amount of reward for that consistency in the first place. This is, I think, is a little bit foreign to, I guess, most miners probably. It's not really the traditional way of mining. Usually when you mine at a set difficulty. The number of shares is um, are sort of proportional to how you get paid. Here, it's all about the difficulty that you mine at, and changing that difficulty will change how you get paid, how much you get paid, how often you get paid. So you're able to play around with this. Maybe you're feeling risky one day, want to increase your difficulty, and you get your big payout, or you increase your difficulty, you don't get paid for 3 days, and you go back down because you feel like you didn't get anything out of it. So the Lithos client will be the main way for miners to interact with the testnet. Uh, I want to put instructions out for the Lithos client, ideally at the end of the month. Still working on currently the HTML UI for it. Currently, it's just a terminal UI that you could type in certain commands into. But I understand that most miners may not necessarily want that. So I'm working on an HTML UI, sort of akin to how the node works. If you've ever run your own node, there's an HTML panel that you can connect to where you can put in certain commands. The Lithos client will be pretty similar to that. So the current testnet, my goal is to release the testnet the week of November 2nd. Um, Really, the last thing I'm working on is these interfaces, the HTML interface, and some of the off-chain code to sort of tie everything together. We have a lot of the contracts done, a lot of the code related with the contracts done, um, as well as a lot of the stratum code done. Now, the current stratum that is being used in Lithos, it is a completely new Java-based stratum. Worst thing I've ever worked on in my life, by the way. So hard to do for no reason. But so right now it's only supporting two miners, WriggleMiner and NBMiner. My goal is to start supporting more miners like Team Red Miner, SRB Miner, etc. But those will happen probably as the testnet goes along. With the initial release of the testnet, we're going to be supporting just those two mining softwares. Uh, but yeah, that's really it. That's the presentation about Lithos. You guys have any questions? uh, yeah, yeah, right. So Lithos client, the current way I have it is that there are a few options. Right now, it just automatically can build the block for you, and what that does is it really takes whatever transactions with the highest fees are inside the mempool. It takes those transactions and it puts those inside of the block. Um, MEV is obviously possible. It's not currently supported in the testnet, but it's definitely very easy, I think, to implement. It would probably require using the HTML UI that I'm creating. Or there could be certain presets to try and get more value out of, for example, Ergodex transactions, right? Additionally, storage rent is automatically claimed by the client. So any storage rent UTXOs that are available to claim at the time of the block will automatically be claimed and given to the miner of the block. All right. Um, yeah. So in general, that's really how the transaction selection block production works. Yeah. Right. Right. It is currently it's prioritizing max fees. So if you're not putting in transactions with high fees, then get the hell out, you know? Right. Exactly, exactly. And miners can also plug in their own transactions, not necessarily MEV itself, but let's say you want to I don't know, maybe you want to fund some Ergo raffle contract or something, right? But you don't want to wait for the mempool to go through. You can put in your own transaction while you mine your block, and it will be put inside the block without having to pay any transaction fee because you're the one who mined it, right? So that's also possible as well. Yep. With merge mining, you said? So merge mining, It should be actually the same because the way merge mining usually works is you have your mining software and it is connecting to various stratum pools. And Lithos protocol itself is its own stratum, um, has its own stratum connection that you can connect to. So if I want to merge mine like Zcash and Ergo, for example, I can um, I can mine to both of them, have the different stratum addresses inside my mining software config, and it'll work normally, essentially. There shouldn't be any big difference. That is probably true, but you can adjust your difficulty to exactly, yeah. You'll have to adjust your difficulty to a lower amount so that you can find high value shares according to whatever hash rate you're mining at. So obviously, yeah, when you're merge mining, you won't have as much computational power, but you can adjust that so you still get paid at a consistent amount and for a fair value according to the amount of power you're putting in towards ERG. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It can accept Babel fees. Okay. I kind of get what you're saying. I guess for chain agnostic things, it would there will have to be at least one transaction on the opposite chain. Uh, so yeah, yeah. So I guess that transaction will probably be required to pay some sort of fee, and that would be by the lender who's collateralizing on the other blockchain. But for example, the Rosen, like the actual payments which are being done on the Ergo blockchain, that can use Babel fees for the payouts going to each miner on the pool. Um, mhm. So right. So the incentive is a pool fee, right? However, I think the difference is that at least the current idea for collateralization is to have it be an open market. So because miners in the end are the ones producing the block at their local machine, they're able to choose what public key address the mining reward goes to. So what that means is they're able to choose what lender they want to receive the reward and therefore the pool fee itself, right? So essentially, you can think of it as an open market, and whoever's providing the best fees is that's who miners are incentivized to choose for their collateral. And that means, like, let's say I'm a lender who is providing 35 ERG as the block reward, right? And I'm taking a 2% fee. The miner could look at all the other collateral UTXOs out there on the blockchain, and they can find one that's maybe for 1%. They'll use that instead. So it's in that way it ends up being most likely standardized at a certain level, and lenders obviously have some incentive to try and increase the fee, but at the same time they're also requiring the Lithos token, which is coming from miners, and in that sense, the idea is to have a sort of balance and a sort of proof of work economy that um, allows lenders to provide their ERG and gain additional ERG back, while allowing miners to sell their Lithos token to these collateral providers. So I think that is theoretically possible. However, one thing to keep in mind is that as miners gain more ERG, they can collateralize the ERG themselves. So then they don't have to pay a fee for themselves. And then at that point, it's almost always you're almost always incentivized to use your own collateral if you have the ERG for it. So third-party collateralization is mostly for miners who don't have the actual ERG amount to collateralize themselves. And this is for new miners who have never mined inside the Ergo ecosystem before, etc. Right? Um, So in that sense, that's what third-party collateralization is used for. Yeah. Right. Right. So like if you, for example, if you've ever solo mined a block on Ergo, you get the block and then you have to wait 720 blocks to have that block confirm, and then it goes to this pay to like this certain address, your mining reward address is what it's called, and then you can spend it from your wallet. When we're collateralizing, what the actual miner of the block is doing, they're changing the reward address to the address of the lender. They're getting that block reward in 720 blocks now. But the collateral that they provided is being instantly paid to all the miners. And the difference is that the collateral they provided is going to be a slightly less amount. And that slightly less amount that's being missing is the fee that the collateral provider gets at the end after 720 blocks. Sorry, can you repeat that? Right. Yeah. That's the current idea right now. Right now it's that's actually not implemented in the testnet. Right now anybody can provide collateral. But the idea is that miners who mine on the pool will get Lithos tokens, and then in order to create a collateral contract that will be used as collateral for any blocks being found, you will have to stake some sort. You'll have to I don't want to say stake. You'll have to lock a certain amount of Lithos tokens inside of that UTXO, and that sort of ensures that there's sort of a market for collateralizers to get Lithos tokens and for miners to sell those Lithos tokens to those collateralizers. So collateralizers, they get the Lithos tokens, they get gain on their ERC, and then miners, they're selling those Lithos tokens to those collateralizers. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't determined the exact amounts yet. I'm still thinking about sort of the tokenomics of the Lithos token. It hasn't really been my main focus. My main focus has been having like a usable protocol, and then I feel that tokenomics after will be more important. But yeah, it doesn't have to be confirmed, you said? Yeah, theoretically, yes, it does not have to be ERG. However, the lender will be paid in ERG no matter what. Yeah, but yes, theoretically, the collateral could be anything that they want. And if the miners choose, for example, to get paid in SIG USD, they could if they wanted to. Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely I think that's fair, honestly. I initially did not even think about a token, but I felt like I want to incentivize collateralization and incentivize people to join decentralized mining pools because honestly, most miners they want whatever works, right? And they see a stratum on Hero Pool, they're going to go join that. They're not going to join Lithos. So I feel like there should be some sort of incentivization for them as well to be part of a decentralized mining pool. And in that way, we're we're ensuring that more people will join this decentralized mining pool um, because they're getting paid a little bit extra, right? And that's not to mention as well MEV and storage rent, which will be additional rewards for them to join a decentralized mining pool as well. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. No, I think it's tough because especially these days, a lot of tokens are useless, in my opinion. There's a lot of things that don't need tokens that have them. So definitely, it's something I've thought about with Lithos as well. Do I need a token? Do I want a token? Is it really necessary? Currently, right now, I feel like a token will be useful in that sense. But right now, The main focus has been the protocol, making sure that works. And then tokenomics will be most likely the last thing I work on. I don't want to prioritize it because while it is important, it's not the main focus of the protocol itself. The main focus of the protocol is decentralizing mining. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 It is kind of similar to that, I believe. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and it allows people who aren't mining to gain erg, and I feel like that's been a big pain point for some people. The ergo ecosystem, I've heard that mentioned before in the past. I'm not a miner. How do I gain value on my erg? And now, obviously, there's a few more ways to do that, but I think having another option for that is useful. Cool. Any other questions? For for mhm. Right. It's mhm. That's actually a really good question. Right now, the idea was that on the HTML UI, you'll be able to see all potential pools that you could join if you want to join a specific pool that has like a certain cause associated with it, or maybe it pays out in a certain way. So that is the general idea. But I think if I can find a way to get it on mining pool stats, that would be so cool. I think it would open it up to a lot more miners, and miners can really see, oh, there's all these decentralized pools. Maybe I can join this one or this one, etc. So I think that's a good idea, definitely. I'm not sure how I would go about adding it, but I could talk to the mining pool stats guy. I've talked to him before when I worked at GetBlock. So he's pretty chill about things. So yeah, I'll ask him about it, see if we can get it integrated there. Right. No, yeah, yeah, it's a good idea for sure. I think one thing also is that because we're using NISPs, it's not really easy to see how much hash rate is on the pool itself totally. We can estimate it, but technically, because NISPs are sort of taking only a small amount of data, it's hard to figure out the exact hash rate. So I'd have to figure that problem out because mining pool stats requires that. But no, I think it's a really good idea. I'll definitely think about it. Anybody who wants to be a sequencer, actually, because sequencers are the ones who are taking these NISPs and then submitting them to the actual blockchain to be evaluated. So anybody who wants to be a sequencer can do that. You can, if you're a miner, you can do that. If you want to be a collateralizer and be a sequencer, that's also allowed. Currently, the idea is to have like a small amount of Lithos token to become a sequencer. Um, there may be changes to that in the future, but right now, we want sequencers to be the ones submitting things, because it just makes it a little bit easier in terms of evaluating all of the different NISPs off chain. Uh, yeah, so sequencers would be the ones creating pools and bootstrapping them. I guess actually now I think about it, I suppose miners could do it too. You don't necessarily have to be a sequencer. Now I think about it. I mhm. Yeah, yeah. I guess realistically, because making a pool doesn't necessarily will require you to send too many transactions. Actually, theoretically, anybody could make a pool if they wanted to, as long as they give a certain amount to prevent spam. Oh, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't know who even did that. All right, so that's it, guys. Thank you very much.